There's something wrong with the dog. I had a corgi named Lemon. I adopted him from a shelter. He has always been skittish because he was the victim of abuse from his former owner, and the poor little thing even had a burn mark on his paw. There was always something just a little off about him, which I attributed to his difficult past. But things took a change for the worse when my fiancé and I were on vacation, and the dog sitter texted us, "There's something wrong with the dog." "What is it? What's going on?" I texted back. I didn't get a reply. I called her. I called the poor 19-year-old girl's mom after not hearing back. The vacation ended early with catching the first flight back and her family opening a missing persons report with the local sheriff's office. This would have made for an interesting enough mystery on its own, but that was only the outermost layer of this rotting onion. One night, my fiancée Ramona and I were in bed together watching news bloopers. As we watched, this news anchor shit his pants on air. I noticed Lemon standing in the hallway staring at us and whimpering. "Are you okay, buddy? What's wrong?" I asked him. "I just shit my pants too." "Oh wait, I'm not wearing any," Lemon said. In that moment, my fiancée screamed at the top of her lungs and couldn't stop. I was speechless, frozen. About an entire minute of screaming later, she whispered, "Did Lemon just talk? What the fuck?" I still didn't respond. Lemon stood there staring at us and panting. Ramona, still shaking, sat up as if to get out of bed, and she fell straight back asleep. She appeared to have passed out. I was awake most of the night, and just as I fell asleep, the alarm went off. Ramona got up and made breakfast. She didn't seem to remember anything. I asked her, "Did Lemon seem off to you last night?" "No, I don't think so." "Why?" "I don't know. He just seemed a little anxious, like when he came in the room last night whimpering." "Huh? I don't remember that." "Maybe I was already asleep." "I gotta get to work. Let me know if he's sick." "Enjoy your off day. Love you." I know I should have been more concerned, but Lemon hadn't done any more speaking, and Ramona didn't remember it. Maybe I dreamed it. I grabbed a bag of Tostitos chips and some hummus dip and went into the den to watch hockey. About 40 minutes into the game, I started hearing what sounded like popcorn kernels popping. I walked back into the kitchen, found Lemon lying in his dog bed lightly whimpering. The popcorn sounds seemed to be coming from him. I leaned in and listened. They were coming from his belly and intensifying in frequency. Now, it wasn't popcorn. It was static, like on an old-fashioned television. Was I losing my mind? I wondered. End of part I. Part 2. There's Something Wrong with the Dog Part 2. Return to Part 1. The static faded, and Lemon looked relieved. It was as if he was in pain while I was hearing that sound. Suddenly, my phone rang, and I briefly shrieked, as I was still very on edge. "Honey, I need you to buy meat." "What? Okay, what kind?" I asked. "Any kind. I like meat. You're so adorable." "I love you." "Yes, I do." "Yes, I do," Ramona said as she hung up. Thankfully, the call was being recorded. I used to have a stalker, so I have an app on my phone to record all calls for evidence in case my stalker would call from another number and threaten me again. Anyway, I played it back. There it was. I didn't imagine it. I looked down at Lemon, and he was chowing down on a scented toy bone. I spent most of the day researching psychosis. Lemon was completely normal the rest of the day. When Ramona came home that night, I was staring intensely at the laptop, biting my fingernails as I read more about mental illnesses. She could see the tension on my face and asked hesitantly if everything's okay. "Yeah, just. Can you listen to this call you made to me this morning?" I played the recording knowing deep down that it would actually be something else and I was imagining it. She stood there frozen as if she saw a ghost. She pulled up her recent calls, and there was no outgoing call to me this morning, but it was her voice, and she knew it. Just then, Lemon started whimpering again. End of Part 2. Part 3. There's Something Wrong with the Dog Part 3. Return to Part 1. Part 2. This has to be a deepfake. "You're fucking with me. You're gaslighting me," Ramona said. She said a lot more and seemed upset, but I wasn't really listening. I was staring at Lemon. In the middle of her sentence, I blurted out, "Lemon's belly is moving." "What?" Ramona looked over, and the dog was lying on its back yelping as its belly moved in ways physically impossible. It looked like the surface of the water in a pot boiling on the stove with countless bubbles rapidly rising to the surface. "I'll get his heartworm medicine," I said. "This isn't a fucking heartworm. I don't know what this is, and I hate to say it, but he probably needs to get put down. He's in a lot of pain. I'll drive him to the vet, and they can decide what's best, okay?" Ramona said. She was right. I just didn't know what to say or do. Then, we heard a sound that I can only describe as both a pop and a splash, like a balloon filled with water bursting open. I looked over at where Lemon's belly used to be, and then the next thing I knew, I was in bed waking up to my alarm clock. Ramona was gone. I wandered into the kitchen in a daze. "Ramona? Honey, there was no sign of her or Lemon. I saw a note on the table written in Ramona's handwriting. I have decided things aren't working out. I am leaving you forever. I am moving back to my home country of Philadelphia where I will be safe in numbers with my large family. I am staying at my mother's. Please don't contact me. There is food in the fridge. Take care of Lemon while I am gone. We'll be back soon. Love you. Bye bye. Be good. I was still experiencing the worst brain fog ever and just said to myself, huh? That doesn't sound like her. I saw the back door was open, and there was a trail of dirt leading into the house. I wandered outside and saw all of Ramona's clothes in the backyard. She was still nowhere to be found. Lemon hurried over, smelled the clothes and looked back at the patio door. Then, he ran to the front door and sat facing it as he does when he's waiting for one of us to come home. Whatever had come over him wasn't present at the moment. He cried while staring at the door hoping she'd come back as I searched the house and called her friends to ask if they had seen her. End of Part 3. Part 4. There's Something Wrong with the Dog Part 4. Return to Part I. Part 2. Part 3. I realized the situation didn't look great if I were to call the police. My fiancé went missing, and I was here the whole time but just went to bed. And for 11 hours? Nobody will believe me, and the babysitter was never found either. This didn't look good for me. I can't get to the bottom of this and find her if I'm in jail. I had no idea what to do except search online to see if anyone anywhere has ever experienced anything similar. Disturbingly, there were several accounts of this phenomenon transpiring seemingly all over the world. No two cases were identical, but they all ended the same. One post was from a woman who said her husband adopted a pet rabbit and soon became obsessed with it. He would feed it at the dinner table and spend all day with it. He eventually removed his clothes and hopped off until he was detained by police. Another was a story of a woman who said her roommate believed her cat would sometimes have the head of a balding middle-aged man with a droopy facial expression who wouldn't meow but would say the word meow slowly and looked confused. The owner would shriek in horror every time she saw this. The woman writing the post thought her roommate was crazy until one day she saw it too, and she ran out of the apartment screaming. When she came back, her roommate was missing. Some of the posts on the site were stories such as these. Some were discussions of how to placate the creature or even invoke it. All I could find were stories of missing people, ruined lives, and madness. There were no answers. One man on the message board by the name of Brian lived near me. He was in downtown Kansas City and believed his sandwich was speaking to him. I don't have a pet, but I've always been a foodie, and I had a sandwich in my freezer that has told me to do terrible things. I was hospitalized after I was found in the lobby of my apartment complex entirely nude with rotten meat shoved into open wounds and suffering from sepsis. I barely survived the infection. I have since been released from involuntary commitment. I was evicted from my unit and am finally rid of that thing. I've suffered no more delusions, hallucinations, or time lapses since. I was communicating with him online for a couple hours, and I agreed to meet up with him tomorrow. By 11:30 p.m., I had spent all day online and was beside myself with the stress of my fiancé missing and was still trying to wrap my mind around what was going on. I went to bed, but I woke up to the sound of an owl hooting. I was in the middle of the woods completely naked. Final part. There's Something Wrong with the Dog. Final part. Return to Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4. I walked through the woods shivering, unsure if I should call out for help or avoid being seen. As I continued walking, I felt an immense headache. My head was pounding. I walked for at least a couple hours through those woods until I came across a feral cat. I felt compelled to approach it, despite the pain growing even worse as I did. I fell to my knees and vomited uncontrollably onto the ground. The cat slowly pranced over and started nibbling on the vomit, first with trepidation, but within seconds, it was like catnip laced with crack for the thing. When it was done, it simply sat facing me, waiting for something. My head began pounding with increasing intensity, and I could no longer walk. I could barely muster the strength to sit up. I pulled out my phone, removed the security lock from the settings so that anyone who discovers my body would be able to read this, and then proceeded to write this story as a cautionary tale. Be careful what pets you adopt. There is something out there, and it is now in a small black cat, but I'm sure there are others. My muscles are locking, and I cannot type much longer. The cat appears to be waiting for me to become fully immobilized, I suspect to feast on my flesh, which is infected with whatever was wrong with the dog. End. Author's note. The bizarre phenomenon described in this story as well as my others is slowly spreading, and further details regarding the nature of these events will be fleshed out in subsequent stories. Below are 2 more stories taking place within the same shared universe. Brian's story. Lemon's previous owner. Never stay out at night or you could encounter the Jolady. If you're ever out late at night for whatever reason it may be, then watch out because she might pick you as her victim, so these rules might help you survive her encounter. Rules to survive the Jol 81. If the area becomes cold or you feel like someone or something is near you, then that means she's nearby too. If you encountered Rule 1, then this is where is bad because you might want to walk faster. Don't let it get too cold or dark around you. 3. If you see a woman in the distance and she looks distressed or hurt, don't fall for that trick. She will try to trick you into getting closer. 4. If for any reason you end up getting too close, I don't know if it's instincts or if she's blocking a way you need to go, but don't make a lot of noise and you're going to see why I say that. 5. If she notices you, don't worry, she can't see but can hear astronomically well, so be cautious around her vicinity. We'll know if she spots you if she begins to scream, as she will move in almost crazed state really fast at the nearest or loudest sound, so use that to your advantage. 7. If you lost her, you are not safe yet, as you gotta make sure she didn't follow you. Even though she can't see, she can smell and hear, so make sure you can't feel or hear her presence. And I think that is all you need to know. So yeah, be careful at night guys. If you have any questions, comment it and I'll answer to the best I can. Found weird black ink on an old leather-bound journal with engravings. The journal was written in Latin, and it belonged to a mysterious alchemist who claimed to have discovered the secrets of immortality. I opened the journal and noticed that the pages were stained with a dark ink that had a metallic sheen. I touched the ink with my finger and felt a cold sensation. I brought my finger to my nose and sniffed it. It had a faint smell of sulfur and iron. I wondered what kind of ink the alchemist had used, and I decided to analyze it in my laboratory. I took a sample of the ink and placed it under a microscope. I was astonished by what I saw. The ink was not made of any known substance. It was composed of tiny black particles that moved and pulsated like living cells. They seemed to react to light and sound. I performed various tests on the ink, but I could not identify its origin or composition. The Eyes in the Attic. Hello, my name is Allison. This story takes place when I was younger, around 4 or 5. I was living with my grandparents who lived on a farm in a forest. It was about 20 miles away from any other people. I only remember snippets when I was living there, but what I am about to tell you is the most haunting and scariest thing for a young child to witness. Now on that day, I was playing with my 3 cousins, let's call them Rose, James and Buddy, fake names. We decided to play hide and seek in the old farmhouse that resided beside the barn where my grandpa's 4 cats were in. Me, Rose and Buddy were the hiders while James was the seeker. I decided to go and hide in the pantry. The attic door was in the pantry. I felt like I was hiding there for hours. That's when I started to feel uneasy, like something was watching me. When I looked up near the attic door, I saw these eyes. They looked cold and dead but still had life in them. As soon as our eyes locked on, I felt so much fear that I screamed and ran out of the farmhouse to my mother and father. I still have nightmares about those eyes. I do still think what would have happened if I never felt something was wrong. What would have happened to me, or what that thing was wanting. A deal. It's been about a year since my life burst into flames. Reporters are my only visitors now, and they only care about one thing: why'd I do it? Why'd I snuff out the life of a woman who was in her prime? An innovator, a philanthropist, and one of the greatest artists of our generation gone. I give them the same answer every time, and yet, they continue to visit, asking the same questions over and over again. Even if I told them the truth, they'd never believe me. I mean, who in their right mind would believe your wife spontaneously combusted at the dinner table during Taco Tuesday? I know I wouldn't. It's not even her screams or the smell of her cooking flesh that still haunt me. It's her last words. They echo in my head, reverberating off the shadows of my nightmares, and collecting at the base of my skull. Please, not yet. She screamed through the flames consuming her throat. What did she mean? Was she just pleading to the heavens above, begging for her life not to end? I don't think so. It was as if she was speaking to someone in the room with us, like she already knew her life was over, but she wasn't ready for it when the time came. I thought I'd take all my questions to the grave without getting any answers, but I got a visitor today. A man who claimed he wasn't a reporter. A man who said he could bring my wife back. He said he could take the pain away, make things like they were before. All I had to do was sign a contract. Where do I sign? No, no. My father slams his hand on the table and my mother just rolls her eyes. My older brother, Jasper, sits there in disbelief. He says, I love her. I'm marrying her. We are moving out. You can't stop me. I'm 19. Me and Sierra just look at each other and then carry on eating. It's better you pretend you don't notice them arguing. My father looks at Jasper and spits. If you leave, take your siblings. I'm not keeping them either. I only let your mother keep them on the basis that you'd take them. Jasper's eyebrows furrow, and I interject. They can't take us in? Please let us stay. No, my mother continues. When you both reached 6, I realized I didn't want you. It was too late. Anyway, Sierra, you're 17 and Atlas, baby, you are 14. Pack up, and once you are both packed, Jasper and his fiancée can pick you up. Jasper pushes his chair back and leaves, slamming the door behind him. We finish the meal in silence. While washing up, my father says, Atlas, it's a shame you have to go. You are my only son. You have potential. I just nod. I don't know what to say. Sierra laughs to herself and drags me upstairs, saying we have to pack. As we pack, Sierra says, "This is mental. Jasper isn't coming for us, and even if he was going to, he isn't looking after us. Be realistic, Atlas. He has his whole life ahead of him. His wedding, school, future jobs, children. He doesn't want us to ruin this." The door clicks locked. Sierra looks at me, then at the door, then back at me. We start to scream, pounding at the door. There is a single window from our second floor bedroom, that only I could maybe climb out of. Without asking, Sierra shoves me over and opens it. I barely know the way to Jasper's new flat, but I have no choice. I scramble out of the window and run. Abby opens the door and says, "Atlas, I've heard of the situation. Come in, sweetheart." She looks down the hall before slamming the door. I beg her to get Jasper to go home and find Sierra, turn the car around, and she calls him. There is a bit of to and fro, but eventually she says, "Jasper turned round. They're gone. All of them." The wedding is set to take place in 3 weeks and Sierra is still missing. The police don't have any leads other than a scribbled note saying, "Atlas knows the." I don't know anything, and the police refuse to believe me.